always told that you are what you eat, but I never knew what time you ate, what time you did everything could have such an impact on your life and on your health. But you're going to learn all about it today from our esteemed speaker, Dr. Satchin Panda, who is the leading expert in circadian rhythm research. He'll tell you more about what that is. He's a professor at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies and a founding executive member of the Center for Circadian Biology at the University of California. And Doug, that's not cicadas, the thing you catch when you go fishing. It's circadian. Joining Dr. Panda today, who better to discuss all of this than our very own Dr. Coyle. After graduating with honors from Harvard College and Harvard Medical School, he trained in his specialty at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston and now serves as a fabulous cardiologist at the renowned Eisenhower Desert Cardiology. He also happens to be one of our favorite interviewers. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Panda and Dr. Coyle.
Scientist and who has been hugely influential. And we've got all of you folks coming, and it's great to see you again. It's been a while since the book festival. In 2012, Dr. Panda's group at the Salk Institute published this groundbreaking paper in which they took mice and they fed them a really unhealthy diet, the typical diet for what my patients eat. And they found that if they could just make them restrict their feeding to an 8-hour window, that they were able to negate a lot of the effects of this diet. So compared to a control group that had the exact same diet, but no restrictions when they ate, these time-restricted fed animals were slimmer, they had better insulin response to glucose, they had healthier livers, and they even had better inflammatory markers and better muscular coordination. So they were just like sexier mice all around. And this paper, which was published in 2012, really took the globe by storm. I don't think it's an exaggeration because this is 2012. Just by 2020, 8 years later, intermittent fasting is cited by more Americans between the age of 18 and 20 than any other dietary pattern. And it still accounts for, I think, something like more than 1 out of 10 Americans follow some form of intermittent fasting. I'm just wondering, can I have a show of hands? How many of you have tried or still are doing some form of intermittent fasting? Wow. So, and it's all this guy's fault. Did you have any idea when you published that paper in 2012 that here you would be in Rancho Mirage?
No, I have no idea. Frankly, actually, when we published that, it was really hard to publish that because, all of my nutrition science colleagues, they know for a very long time, and I also agree that the quality of food that we eat and the quantity are important. But then when we said timing is important, people had a lot of skepticism. They said, did you really make sure that these mice ate? Did they actually observe that nutrition? And they pooping out all that extra food. I had so much questions that I would give presentation and people would come up to me and ask, should we do this? And I was very skeptical, and I was also fearful that if people do it and then they become hypoglycemic, it's a big issue. So I would say, well, if you have a pet mouse and you want to keep your pet mouse healthy, maybe you can do it. But very quickly people started doing it, and then I had to go. What was really surprising was we did this study for 8 hours feeding because, we typically grad students and postdocs who work, they work for 9 hours in a day. So they would feed the mouse for 8 hours. And people thought that 8 hours is almost like the rule. If you do 9 hours or 7 hours, it may not work. So 2 years later, we actually did this study more systematically. And we found that whether mice eat for 8, 9, or 10 hours, they're still healthy. And more surprisingly, if the mice eat for 9 or 10 hours for 5 days a week, and then in the weekend they can go and party. And actually these party mice were really partying. Like they ate more food than the mice that are asked to eat.
They got little beer cans.
Yeah. And surprisingly, even if they did this for 5 days, they got almost 80% of the benefits. So that was also amazing, because then we thought, okay, so even if humans can do it for 5 to 6 days in a week, and they still have 1 or 2 days to socialize, because we have to socialize. The cradle of human civilization, our existence depends on fireside chat. Although we don't have fire these days, but next to a TV, next to a light, whatever happens in the evening, all those. So I was very happy.
That's really great that you built in this 2 days of a holiday every week.
But we don't tell our people that you can do 2 cheat days. We know that they will cheat anyway, so that's okay.
So it's like a very human touch to this.
Yeah.
So you were part of a group that years before had discovered the sensor for light.
Yeah.
So what got you interested in this cyclical nature of feeding and fasting? How did you go from the light sensor to...
Yeah, so it was 2001 when we discovered, along with 2 other groups, there is this blue light sensor in our eye that senses blue light and increases alertness in our brain, reduces depression, and also has many other benefits. And that time, we thought that this blue light sensor resets our brain clock, and then the brain clock controls all the clocks throughout our body, for our liver clock. So then you might ask, well, why liver clock and brain clock? So just like we go to sleep because that's when our brain reset, rejuvenate, and repair itself. Similarly, our liver also needs some downtime to repair itself, reset, detoxify, and then we are ready for another day. So the idea at that time was a brain clock controls our liver clock, and the brain clock is tied to the outside world through light. Then we thought, well, if it is so, if we feed mice at the wrong time, when the liver is not ready, then what will happen to liver clock? So that's why I got interested in how food resets our liver clock. And we realized that food is a very strong time giver, or synchronizes our liver to the outside world. So then we got interested in this very fundamental question. If we improve the circadian rhythm in liver, can we reduce the disease burden that starts from liver?
So I love that alliteration of the brain resetting, repairing, rejuvenation.
Yeah.
Probably think got the order wrong,
Yeah.
but that's the 3 R's,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's this brain, but you're mentioning that the liver also has a clock. And so is it like universal that almost every cell in the body has a rhythm, has a clock of gene expression or protein synthesis and different cellular functions?
Yes, that's one of the surprising discovery in the last 25 years, that just like our brain has a clock, almost every organ, even our hair follicle also has a clock. So that means that our hair actually doesn't grow continuously. It grows and stops.
Yeah.
So
when you get to be 60, it just grows from your nose mostly. But
yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
So yeah. So
sorry.
I'm not making any comment about those who have more or less hair,
Okay.
but the relevance is this, that starting from here, we'll go to liver. So what happens is our hair has a cycle. So it's sometime there is time of the day when it has to repair itself, and there are time of the day when it grows. So then, what is interesting is we took another experiment. We took a group of mice. We asked, okay, what is the relevance of this hair growth? So we irradiated these mice with the same dose of irradiation that's given to cancer patients. And we know that many cancer patients lose hair because they cannot repair this damage. So mice are night active. So that means they actually repair their hair at nighttime. So we give the irradiation in the morning or in the evening. If we give the morning irradiation, then mice lose 85% of their hair. So they become this bald, weird-looking mice. If we give the same irradiation in the evening, the mice retain 85% of their hair.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
so that's the impact of having a good circadian rhythm and timing your treatment, in this case irradiation, to the best time. So similarly, liver has a lot of rhythms. Liver makes a lot of proteins that are in our plasma to fight infection. And every day, even if you are eating healthy diet, there are many things in our diet that our body doesn't need. So for example, even if you are eating green leaves and vegetables, though some fruit color, the natural color, is also xenobiotic. There may not be. So the liver breaks down, and also kidney breaks down many of these toxic chemicals, and there is a specific time when it can break down. And when we have no rhythm or lack of rhythm, then our liver cannot detoxify. So that's part of the rejuvenation of liver that happens. And then liver also regenerates.
Yeah.
So our liver actually makes a lot of new cells. And this is again going back to mouse experiment. It's not our lab, but a lab in Japan did this experiment. They did partial hepatectomy, which is also done in
So taking a part of the liver.
taking
Yeah.
part of the liver. And if they take a part of the liver in the morning versus evening, there was a huge difference how quickly the liver grew back.
Yeah.
So there is a strong rhythm in this liver regeneration.
That's right. And I think there's a whole field now. It's called chronobiology. And there's some preliminary suggesting that when you can, if you give chemotherapy at different times, you increase effectiveness and decrease toxicity. So a lot of this, it's not, and vaccinations, there's a time of day for vaccinations.
Yes.
In your book, you point out there's a time of day for bypass surgery that people heal quicker. So understanding these rhythms has tremendous implications. And I was trying to think of like a metaphor to understand this, and I was thinking about motion sickness. And you know, that when we sense if our bodies are moving or not, or where we are in space, based on inputs from our eyes and our inner ear, and those need to be concordant. But when you have discordance, when you're reading a book in a car, or you're below deck on a ship or something, you get car sick, you get seasick, because your eye is telling you something different from your ear, right? So we understand that's vertigo, seasickness. And it seems like that's a metaphor for that you really want all your different clocks
To work together.
to be on the same page. Is that, otherwise you get sick.
Yeah, and not only sick, it starts from very early childhood. Even there is one example that really struck me. So you mentioned this light sensor that we discovered.
Yeah.
And then the idea is we should get light, blue light during the day, and we should avoid blue light at night. Very simple idea. But then, if you look at all the ICUs, they're lit 24/7. And even neonatal ICUs, these little babies who are born a little bit earlier, they're also put into continuous light. So there was this experiment done in Mexico City where this doctor took premature babies and then divided them into two groups. One group was put into continuous light, just like standard of care. The other group was given light only for 12 hours, and in the evening they would make a nice little hat out of cloth and then put it like a helmet on top of the head, so that the eye is a little bit in darkness, although these babies are, most of the time they have their eyes closed, but the body is exposed to light. And amazingly, these babies that experienced light-dark cycle, they grew much faster. And they were released from hospital 13 days earlier than the standard of care.
Yeah.
So now, think about it. In the US, every year there are 3.8 million babies born, and roughly between 10 to 11% are premature babies. 380,000 babies are premature babies who have to spend many days, if not weeks, in neonatal ICU. Just this light-dark cycle will, if it is, and actually in Mexico City now, that has become the standard of care, light-dark cycle, but not in the US. But now, imagine, like, if we can reduce the hospital stay of 380,000 babies by 10 days, that will pay for all the circadian rhythm research ever done anywhere in the world.
I wish my 3 daughters had the same respect for day-night cycle when they were babies. So Dr. Ramnas is here. He's one of the leading physicians at our emergency room at Eisenhower, and he essentially is a highly skilled, well-paid shift worker.
Yeah.
What, right? So, Aubrey certainly would say not overpaid, highly paid. But he's the CEO, the ex-CEO of our hospital. Yeah. So tell me about what happens with shift workers then, because they're getting different light and feeding signals, so they're getting discordant messages, right?
Yeah.
So they have health consequences to that.
Yeah, so there are a lot of adverse effect, disease risk goes up for all the shift workers. And actually, we did a review a few years ago, went through 50 years of literature on shift workers or healthy individuals who are brought into the lab. And you mentioned that you have been in Chuck Seisler's labs. Similarly, there are circadian labs where you can go there. They will actually screw up your circadian rhythm by putting you in weird 20 hours day-night cycle, or they will change the day-night cycle as if you are flying to Paris and coming back every 6 days. They do that. And they can do that only for a week or 2 because it's really harmful. So what we have seen is there are nearly 100 different diseases whose risks go up under circadian rhythm disruption. It starts from obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dementia, cancer. Even for young women, it can be irregular menstrual cycle, difficulty conceiving, or there are many, many different chronic disease that can happen.
Cancer, too.
Yes. So I'll come to that, cancer. So there is also a lot of studies that shift work can be a significant risk factor for cancer. So AIRC, which is a arm of World Health Organization, it brought in many cancer researchers and epidemiologists. They reviewed all the data, and then they finally officially decided that shift work is a group 2A carcinogen. So this is first time that one type of work itself, it's not working in the mines, not working in some really weird places where you are exposed to non-toxic chemicals, but just working in shift is as bad as getting exposed to carcinogen. And that was done in 2007. They reviewed the literature again, and 2021 again they have.
And I think it's important to point out that you do this when you point out this research about the shift workers. It's not getting paid for the work that's causing the cancer. It's having the disruption in your sleep cycle. And in many ways, I think a lot of people here essentially are shift workers. If you are a caregiver, you're a shift worker. If you've got a young child at home, God knows you're a shift worker.
Yes.
Right?
Every mother is a shift worker.
If you really like watching Netflix at 2 in the morning, you're a shift worker. Right? I mean, any disruption to a regular cycle is unhealthy, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so this is a dichotomy we have, because unless we disrupt our circadian rhythm, we cannot create wealth. Just imagine if everybody goes to bed at 7 or 8 in the evening and wakes up, then we cannot run the modern society. And modern society actually lives with the work of shift workers. Just imagine from early morning, from the time you get up to go get your coffee fix and all these croissant and anything that you buy in the morning, those things freshly prepared were by somebody who woke up at 2 o'clock and came to the bakery and baked it. Starting from there until the end of the day, until when you go to bed, every single day, if you count, our life is supported by at least a dozen different types of shift workers. And when we get sick, we call you in the middle of the night.
That's right.
And so that's why I say that without shift workers, we cannot continue. We cannot live in the modern society. So that's why we call shift workers are the healthy heroes. And
but there's health consequences to that.
There are very bad.
And I think about, like, during the pandemic, how many people got COVID, and how many got COVID not while they were at home, right? When you came back from a trip, or there's some disruption to the sleep-wake, and we always blame it on airplanes, but it could also be the change in our when we're sleeping, when we're waking up, because you have mentioned that the immune system goes down. So it's Dave. So it's a graveyard shift. It's really a graveyard shift. Okay.
No, actually, there are also experiments done by many of my colleagues where they take old rats, and these old rats are given 6-hour jet lag every week. So that means they're flying from, say, East Coast to London, and then coming back every week. And what they found was after 10 or 12 simulated jet lag, nearly 50% of these rats became so sick that they had to euthanize, or they had to die.
Wow.
And another thing that happened was they realized that when they do this chronic jet lag, they become more susceptible to infection. Even small amount of bacterial infection that the rat's immune system can fight, the rat cannot fight anymore. So even a tiny amount of bacteria can be lethal for the rats. So I guess that's what happens, that when we are jet lagged, or when we are doing this night shift, graveyard shift, then our immune system goes down, or it can also become hyperactive. So our body cannot tune the immune system to the right dose. So either we become susceptible to getting an infection, or we produce an immune reaction that's so much that it can cause flare-up. So for
inflammatory
problems.
Yeah.
So for example, people who have autoimmune disease, they usually see a flare-up because the immune system goes out of control.
All right, so I think we've got everybody's attention, and everybody's feeling kind of bad now. so now tell us, like, what's a good day look like? How do we get a good schedule? So what are your take-homes, like messages? What does the ideal schedule look like?
Yeah, so when it comes to, we should not forget that there are 3 foundations of health, that is sleep, nutrition, and physical activity. And then the other 2 things that we have to keep in mind are light. One thing we have to keep in mind, because we should get enough daylight during the day and avoid light at night. So now, if we combine all of these, then the question is, how can we design a 24-hour day that will actually work to our favor, reduce our risk for future disease, accelerate cure from whatever disease we are having, and third thing, can we come back to play, rehabilitation or recovery from a disease course. So in that way, what we think is there are 6 points take-home message.
6 commandments. All right. So the 2 main cues for our circadian system are light and feeding.
Light and food.
Okay.
And then our body is good at doing something at different times, so that's why we'll fit that in. So number 1 is whatever time you're going to bed, keep a consistent bedtime, because when you go to bed at different time, then your body gets confused. So try to have a consistent time, give or take maybe 30 minutes. So if you're going to bed at 10 o'clock, then maybe 9:30 to 10:30 is your window.
Okay.
And then be in bed for at least 8 hours, so that you can get 6.5 to 7.5 hours of sleep. I'm not saying that you should sleep for 8 hours. Be in bed for 8 hours so that you can get 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep.
Okay.
As we get older, our body doesn't remember how much sleep we need. So that's why, and our sleep becomes also very thin, so we can get up very easily with a mechanical disturbance or whether it's heat or anything. So that's why giving yourself 8 hours in bed is the best thing that you can do. And then we can go back to what we can do for better sleep. But during sleep, there are a few things happen. One, within the first 3 to 4 hours of sleep, we produce growth hormone. And although we are not growing, we need that hormone to repair our lining, repair our body. So we need that burst of growth hormone in the first half of the sleep. And then during the first half of the sleep, also our stress hormone goes down first, and then it comes back up. So that's why we need that sleep. And then our brain rewires, it makes memory, and then literally detoxifies itself. So only in the last 10 years, scientists have figured out that brain has a detoxification process that happens only in our sleep. It doesn't happen during daytime, only when we sleep. So
it's a very active time.
It's
actually.
a very active time.
Yeah.
Actually, brain is doing a lot of stuff. It's taking out the trash, and when it doesn't happen, then of course it impairs our memory.
Yeah.
So that's why this 8 hours in bed. And then in the morning, then the question is, what should be our morning routine? So the number one is to avoid food for at least 1 to 2 hours after waking up.
This is number 2 now?
This is
rule
number
two.
two.
Okay.
Number 2 is avoid food for at least 1 to 2 hours
So
because
in bed for 8 hours, consistent bedtime. And then number 2, don't eat or drink anything except water for an hour.
Except water, yeah, for an hour.
No coffee for an hour.
Yeah, because that's the time when our stress hormone is at its peak. Cortisol peaks exactly at our wake-up time or a little bit after. And then our nighttime melatonin level also is slowly going down. It hasn't gone down all the way. So melatonin, just like it makes our brain to sleep, it also makes our pancreas to sleep. So that means we cannot produce enough insulin in response to our food. And most of our food does have a little bit of sugar or carbohydrate. Like if you have a coffee with cream and sugar, that does.
So the insulin is important because when you eat a meal, the insulin tells your cells to take it up so that your blood sugar doesn't spike. And then if you're not sensitive to the insulin or you're not producing enough, then you're going to have really high blood sugar, which has consequences that are negative. So it's important to be in a state where you can handle the sugar.
Yeah. So that's why waiting for one or 2 hours actually helps your organs to wake up. Although your brain has woken up, all these organs are taking their time to come back and be in full swing. So that's the number 2. And then number 3 is try to again have your breakfast or breaking the fast, I say. So breakfast is not necessarily the morning meal that you eat right after waking up. It can be at 10 o'clock, it can be at 11, whatever time it is. Try to be consistent with your breakfast time. And then after your breakfast, count and eat all your food maybe within 8, 10, or maximum 12 hours, not beyond 12 hours.
The breakfast, so many of my patients or friends or people I know who've done this intermittent fasting find it most convenient to drop the breakfast. Right? Is that because you cut out the breakfast, like what's the big deal? I'll wait till lunchtime and then I'll have my whatever. But it turns out that that's probably the worst meal to cut out if your goal is to lose weight. Certainly, it seems like if you're going to have a window, you want it earlier in the day. That they've done these studies, right? That the body loses more weight if your window is shifted earlier in the day. So big breakfast is what you really want.
Yeah, big breakfast is much better. I also said that in the pursuit of perfection, don't give up what is good for you.
That's true. So it's better but even in your second book here, when you set out the thing, you suggest that the breakfast should constitute 40% of the calories that you're ideally.
So that's
breakfast should be 40% of the calories that you have for the entire day, and only 25% at dinner is what you suggest.
Yeah. So in that way, if you front load, because there are a few things. One is in the morning, your digestive system has enough digestive juice. Your insulin production is much better in the first half of the day. And for the rest of the day, you are also active. So whatever you consume in the morning, that has better chance of getting absorbed without raising your blood sugar too high And also, since you're active, moving around for the rest of the day, it's way much better to manage your blood sugar. And when you are spending that energy, you are actually taking out all the extra fat much easily. So that's why it's easier to lose weight by having earlier breakfast. Having more food at breakfast. But what people get confused is, well, if I have breakfast so early and if I have to eat only for 8 hours, then my dinner will be too early and I cannot socialize. In all of our studies, we actually, going back to the mouse studies, since we know 8, 9, and 10 are more or less similar, and if you stick to a 10-hour window, then you are more likely to do it for a long period of time. So that's why we ask in all of our studies to do a 10-hour intermittent fasting or 10 hours eating.
It's more real world. Yeah.
It's real world. So in that way, even if you start your breakfast at 9:30 or 10, you still have enough time in the evening to socialize and have meal with somebody else.
Yeah.
So that's the number 3.
You're so practical. One of the books used to say, happy hour food is cheaper.
Yeah.
I love that. Happy hour food is cheaper. That's why wouldn't you eat earlier?
Yeah. And also another thing is, if you finish early, if your kitchen closes early, and your bar is also closing early, so you cannot drink too much.
So then the rule, 8 to 10 hours window.
Yeah.
Okay. Next rule. Exercise or
so number 4 is yes, exercise is very important, and I know that in a warm place like this, you may be more likely to go for a walk, run, or play tennis or whatever you're doing in the early morning. But there is also studies now showing that late afternoon or evening exercise is much better than morning exercise. Exercise is better than no exercise. Let's make it clear.
All right.
But late afternoon, evening exercise is better for everyone. So how? So if you're a young athlete, then people have shown that athletic performance is much better in the late afternoon, early evening, to the extent that if you're into sports betting, you figure out whether your West Coast team flies to East Coast and plays, and if they fly and play on the next day, Monday Night Football, then they have a better chance of winning against the home team. So that's 30 years of NFL data that is analyzed.
It's in the NBA too.
Yeah, it's in the NBA.
That the closer you play to what your afternoon would be, the best your chances of winning go up. See, that's why the Celtics went down, because they were against the Warriors, right? So
and then for older adults, what happens is our body is warm enough, our joints are more flexible, and our motor coordination is much better in the late afternoon.
So less injuries.
So there is less risk for injury. Right. And then the other reason is our pancreas is much better in the first half of the day. In the evening, it is slowing down. It's not producing enough insulin. So by exercising, our muscles can absorb glucose even without a little help from insulin. So in that way, we can better control blood glucose if we exercise in the evening. In fact, there is a study from Karolinska Institute where they took patients with type 2 diabetes, and they gave the exercise. The same patients had to do the exercise in the morning for 1 or 2 weeks, and then there was no exercise for 1 or 2 weeks, and then they had to do the same exercise in the evening, and vice versa. There was another group that started with afternoon exercise, was out, and morning. What they found was within the same individuals, afternoon exercise was much more effective in reducing blood glucose than the same exercise in the morning.
Now, for those of you who are my patients, the first part was really important. Any exercise is better than no exercise.
Yes.
So,
yes,
right?
I must clarify.
Really
Any exercise is better.
Thank you. And there's some data that if you exercise early, you burn more fat, and so there's it's next rule.
Yeah. So then the next one is the light. So now we're on to 5th. So daylight is the richest source of blue light. So that means, and the blue light actually helps to reduce depression, increase alertness, and also synchronizes our brain clock much better. So that's why during daytime, it's better to step outside. You don't have to go to the sun, because even in that shaded area out there, you get what we call 5,000 to 10,000 lux. This is the unit of light, lux of light. But for a regular person like all of us, we need actually 1,000 lux of light for at least an hour. So if you're having your breakfast and lunch next to a large window, that will give you 1,000 lux of light.
But,
and if you're
but here, all our windows are treated to prevent
see.
block UV light,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I tell people, you got to go outside. I
Yeah.
don't think sitting inside by the window gives
Yeah.
you as much.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
true. Here it's all treated.
Yeah.
So, but even if you walk outside under the shade for 30 minutes, that's actually enough light.
So at least 30 minutes of
At least
daylight, preferably in the morning.
Yeah,
every day.
preferably in the morning. So
Okay.
if you're going for a gentle walk in the morning, that's also good enough to.
So you can score 3 of these with one outdoor walk
Yeah.
before breakfast after waking up, right?
Yeah.
You got your outdoor, you got
Yeah.
some exercise, although it's not in the afternoon,
Yeah.
and you get some daylight.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Then number
next-
6.
Number 6.
Yes, number 6 is no bright light and no food for 2 to 3 hours before your bedtime.
Bright light includes television, right?
Well, bright light, so what happens is 2 to 3 hours before we go to bed, our body begins to produce melatonin, the sleep hormone. The body actually every day it produces that. And if we're exposed to bright light, so bright light will be, I'm sitting in bright light, so around 100 lux. So the rule of thumb is in your living room and bedroom, you should not have you should not have brighter than 40-watt light bulbs. So ideally, if you have 20-watt light bulb, if you have a dimmer, that's better, because the dimmer you can actually dim them down. So that's one way. The second way is to wear blue filtering glasses.
But you can also get these new light bulbs now that don't
Yeah.
have as much blue light.
Yeah.
And you can replace all the light bulbs in your home with these
Or
smart bulbs.
Or spectrally tuning, so the Philips Hue and then few other light bulbs. You can actually change whether they're blue light, because during daytime, if you're not going out.
Oh, but then you say, so you can say, well, I don't,
Okay.
that,
Yeah.
so when I read your book, I read your first book in 2018, and I was like, I got too much blue light, and Susan wasn't up for changing all the lights out
Yeah.
in the house. So what I did is I got these, I look like Elton John.
Yeah.
I-
You're going to perform now?
Yeah, so I got these blue light blocking clip-ons, and I just look like a freak at night. But I think I slept better. But
Yeah,
it's,
so-
I have to say, it's a little harder for me to read
Yeah.
with them on. But
Yeah.
I switched my Kindle to a Kindle that has no light coming out of it at all. I'm really trying to be better with my screens.
Yeah. No, I guess the point is, many people, young people particularly, they will go for grocery, or they will go to the drugstore. And if you go to grocery store or drugstore, there is 1,000 lux of light these days, because those stores are super bright. And that's what we are talking about. Don't plan your grocery store visit or drugstore visit after 8 o'clock at night. And particularly if you have grandkids, those kids are even more sensitive to that light.
And light,
bright
turns
light.
out, nighttime light is a huge health issue. And I didn't really realize until I was preparing for this interview, I found data for one study had 400,000. So there's tremendous amount of data that just having any kind of light in your bedroom is bad. Even a night light, a television is like big bad. Okay, but even just a night light on is associated with obesity. Wow. And then I said, oh, that's really bad. Then I found a study that was really chilling, where they used satellite imagery, and they found that if you live in a community that's brighter at night, there is an association with obesity and metabolic things. And then it's outside, just bright. I guess you take out the garbage or something, and maybe you see the bright light. But nighttime pollution is a huge health issue. It turns out. It's you really. So.
And then another thing is we should also avoid food, because food, as I said, melatonin also inhibits insulin production.
Yeah.
And release. So that's why.
So food is big because you're shutting down, right? You're not really digesting at night.
Yeah. And then your peristalsis movement of gut actually moves the food slowly. So that also shuts down when we sleep. So even though you eat very close to bedtime, that food doesn't get digested, and the nutrition is not absorbed very well. And another reason is when we eat, blood circulation goes to the core to absorb all that nutrition, and the core body temperature goes up. And when our body is warmer, it's difficult to sleep. So that's another reason why avoiding food for 2 to 3 hours before bedtime is much better.
So let me see if I get these right. Now, I think, okay, so at least 8 hours in bed with consistent sleep and wake times.
Yeah.
Okay. 1 hour after waking up with nothing to eat, including coffee or tea.
But one can drink water.
Okay. And then at least half an hour of daylight, preferably in the morning.
Yeah.
At least some exercise every day, preferably in the afternoon. A eating window from breakfast to the last bite dinner of somewhere 8 to 10 hours, but definitely less than 12 hours.
Less than 12 hours.
And here's a shocking thing, that half of Americans have an eating window of 15 hours or more. We're like those rats that have unlimited access to food. We just and only 10% of Americans, in your study, ate in less than 12 hours. Less than 10%.
Consistent.
If you really consider, like, even that last bite of a cookie before you go to bed, or a glass of warm milk, right?
Yeah.
And then the last one was at least 2 to 3 hours of no bright lights and no food before bedtime.
Yeah.
Is that got them?
Yeah.
All right.
That's it.
So one question that always comes up when you talk about circadian rhythms is, and these people are world travelers in this audience, is like, what do I do when I fly to Europe? How do I minimize jet lag? Do you have any tips for people on that?
Well, flying to Europe is easier because, most of the flights are leaving in the late afternoon or evening, and then they reach early morning in Europe. So the only thing you should be doing in flight is sleep. Nothing. So it's better to eat before you get on the plane, and then have a good night's sleep. Anyway, the European breakfast is much better than the airline breakfast.
So you're saying as soon as you get on, you want to align your feeding time with the time in the new zone. So because you're going to be arriving in the morning there, it's like you're flying throughout the night for where you're going, and you wouldn't be eating at night, so don't eat.
Don't eat.
Because this is Rancho Mirage. These people all fly business class.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the challenge.
And
I know.
And they are like, they're looking at the menu and they're ordering. That's a bad idea.
Actually, business class is worse, because in economy, they just come throw the tray at you, and within 15 minutes you finish up, and then you can go to bed. But then in business class, the ritual goes on for 5-course meal.
But when you come back.
So when you come back, it's different.
You're in heaven. You're eating the whole flight then when you come back, because it's like daytime, right?
Yeah, so when you come back, it's a little bit challenging. So that's why coming back, when you are starting to get to your flight, what happens is in Europe, you're waking up a little bit early, 6, 5,
because usually you're leaving in the morning there to get back to California.
Early in the morning. So the point is, don't eat until you are at the airport. Because when you check in, it's around 8 or 9 or 10. So that's when you can start eating, and then avoid sleeping throughout the flight. So, because that's the time when you can actually watch all your television and everything, so that you are sleep deprived. And when you reach home here in the evening, you are so tired that you will go to sleep.
Don't eat dinner after getting off the plane.
Yeah, don't eat. Because if it is too late, because if your flight is reaching, say, 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you still have time, but not if it is if you're reaching home around 8 or 9 at night, then it's a little bit hard. Yeah. So that's what I started doing. And it's
going there, you're leaving here at night, and you're getting there in the morning, so don't do anything except sleep. Eat before you get on the plane.
Yeah.
Just sleep. And then when you're coming back, you get on the flight in the morning, you're going to get here in the evening, so it's like your whole day is on the plane.
It's long.
So you should be awake and eating and doing all that.
So that you increase your sleep pressure so much that you'll fall asleep.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. So thank you. You're showing us that there is time for every matter under heaven. Is that it? I think you're telling us. So thank you so much, and thanks for coming. Please stick around.
Thank you.